Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Weekly Reads. I've had a pretty good reading week, but before I get into the books I read, I'm going to touch on Tiger King. I watched it this past weekend, and I was infuriated from beginning to end. Ultimately, what is lost, not only as the subject of the show, which is that the Joe Exotic, Carol Baskin, lost sight of the Tigers, but also the show itself did. As much as the filmmaker may have originally been interested in how the tigers are kept, the treatment of these captive tigers, it really just became basically a soap opera. And the tigers were lost in that. And I feel the series is deeply irresponsible on a number of levels, but I am not going to go into a rant. I filmed a rant a few minutes ago, and I don't particularly want to go there, so I just suffice it to say, I would highly recommend, if you are interested in this, track down I think it's the January 2020 issue of National Geographic. That has a story on it about tigers in captivity in the United States, and it is fantastic. So anyway, moving on to what I read this week. So the first nearly destroyed the dust jacket. I read Technology in the Ancient World by Henry Hodges. This is a reread. I read this book for the first time about 10 years ago, maybe longer than that, and really enjoyed it and wanted it in my collection ever since. And I picked it up a few years ago and quite happy to have it. It is an exhaustive history of the development of technology in the ancient world, from prehistory to the earliest states in Mesopotamia and Egypt and on into Rome. And it is a fantastic book, filled with lots of illustrations, a lot of technical illustrations, just brilliant and very, very useful, I think, in a lot of ways. My one criticism, I think, is pretty much the history of technology, or technology in the ancient world, generally starts with Mesopotamia and then Egypt and really the Near East, and then incorporates Greece and Rome, but it leaves sort of the periphery. Northern Europe, the Indus Valley, China tell the last chapters, and those last chapters are problematic, to say the least. I think probably a more contemporary work, which probably should be multi-volume, starting with the Near East and then moving on to other areas, I think would definitely be very, very interesting. Particularly as hopefully the archaeology has improved since this was written. But I would love to see a new history or a new version of this book. Obviously by a different, but definitely I think an updated version or a new history of technology in the ancient world. And the second book I read this week, and just finished it about an hour ago, is A Great State, China and the World by Timothy Brook. So this is a history of China and China's relationships with its neighbors, and eventually Europe and the rest of the world, from the founding of the Yuan dynasty under Kublai Khan through the Ming, the Qing, and eventually the Republic. And so rather than being a grand history, the book is broken down into stories, individual snippets of history that Brook uses to illustrate what was going on in China and China's relationships at the time. And I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was very fascinating. I might have preferred a more narrative history rather than a more individual stories as it's done here. And I do think there is at least one chapter, if not probably two, where I have serious concerns. The one is chapter no. The Pirate and the Bureaucrat, I think. No. It's The Englishman and the Goldsmith, chapter 7, where Brook ends off the chapter with the goldsmith in the chapter giving, I suppose, sort of his final thoughts as to why he did what he did, or allegedly did. And obviously no such record exists. So that supposition, that bit of fancy, just doesn't work. And I think he goes in the next chapter, I think he maybe plays a little bit into that too, and that concerned me. But I think overall I really enjoyed the book. I particularly like his final thoughts in the epilogue, and definitely the final passages of the final chapter dealing with the Republic, where he sort of expands upon a concept by Tony Jute about the post-war or post-World War II trials and what they were actually about, and Tony Jute's concept of the post-war. So I thought that was really interesting and quite enjoyed the book. So now moving on to this weekend's reading and then this following week's reading. I'm hoping to be able to read two books this weekend. They're both rather short story collections. Dark Mondays by Kage Baker, which I read, I want to say at the turn of last year. And I thought it was a middling short story collection, but I do want to reread it and see if my opinions have changed any. And I also want to read C.L. Moore's Jirel of Joiry collection. So these collect her Jirel of Joiry stories, Black God's Kiss, Black God's Shadow, Jirel Meets Magic, The Dark Land, and Hell's Guard. This story. So looking forward to this. And then on Monday, I will start The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I tried this book once before, several years ago, and I didn't quite get on with it. And I'll see if I don't get on with it, or if maybe Brandon Sanderson's not quite for me, which I know as somebody who is deeply into fantasy, I mean, obviously, fantasy is one of my favorite genres, probably my favorite genre. That I don't quite get on with Sanderson is probably a bit of a heresy. Um, but we'll see. But I'm not going to read it completely through. Like, start June 1st and then plow on until I finish it. Because I also want to do some. I want to have a Pride TBR. Read some gay literature over the course of June. So my plan is I'm going to read. I'm going to start The Way of Kings on Monday, June 1st. But during the weekends, I'm going to set The Way of Kings aside and read some gay literature, which I'm still figuring out how I want to do it. So I might start with books that I can read over the course of a weekend and pretty quickly, and then maybe once The Way of Kings is over, move to longer books that would take me maybe a week to, or like a work week to read, or into the weekend or something like that. But I will have a Pride TBR up on Monday, and that will be weekend reading until I finish Way of Kings. Although I might also do a book on Arab history too, so I don't know. But we'll see. But I will definitely have a Pride TBR up on Monday. Now, as for my watching, I did not mention Ice Fantasy this week. I didn't watch it. Sunday, I wanted to do some writing, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to come back to Ice Fantasy Sunday. I know this week, today and tomorrow, I want to, instead of watching something on Netflix, I want to get some BookTube videos watched. I know there were two rather long BookTube videos from the BookTube Prize that I haven't watched yet, which I really want to. So, yeah, that'll probably be my plans for this week. So, until Monday, I'll see you. I guess that's it for now. I'll see you again on Monday with my Pride TBR, and until then, thank you, BookTube, and have a great weekend, and stay safe.